Hello. Welcome to this week's Author Spotlight. I know it's been some time since I've been in the group, but I'm very excited because of the Smart Author System working with Karen. She has a run of authors who are now published, so I'm very excited to be able to share with you yet another author's journey, the highs, the lows, and the lessons learned, and hopefully that will help you and encourage you with your journey. So without any further ado, I'd like to invite our guest today, Jim James, to come and talk to us about his journey. So welcome, Jim. Welcome to...
Thank you, Cheryl, so much for inviting me to be here on the show. Thank you so much.
Fabulous. So you have, please put your book up, because there's just something magical, isn't it, about having the book in your hand. So this is the book.
There it is.
We have got a ticker tape here just to sort of remind you. The Unnoticed Entrepreneur, 50 Ideas for Your Company to Stand Out. And when was it published?
Well, actually it came out on the 2nd of September. So the ink is still drying.
It's still
Cheryl.
drying.
Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
Yes, indeed. So tell us a little bit about your journey as an author. When you decided you were going to write this book, from when you decided to where you are now, that's been like what?
It's been a year, actually. What happened for me was that I was overseas for 25 years in Asia, and I came back and I joined a group called Wealth Builders. And I heard Karen speak on Wealth Builders on a podcast, and she made the process seem accessible, but also the outcome seem essential, really, for someone that's been away for so long as an entrepreneur and need to kind of re-establish myself, Cheryl, because in Asia I have a business still, but in the UK I'm unknown because I spent a lot of time behind the Chinese firewall. So listening to Karen over a year ago, she had an introductory offer, actually. And she said, I'm launching this program and for Wealth Builders. And so I signed up there and then, even though I wasn't ready to write the book straight away. But I knew that what she shared and her methodology and her support group would be invaluable when I was ready. So just about a year ago.
Yeah, so you signed up about a year ago, and then what happened?
I produce a podcast, Cheryl, and what I decided to do was to use the podcast as the way to write content. So through the forms that Karen had in her Librotas platform, I went through those and looked at who my avatar was and who I'd need to be, addressing my book to. And then also looking at the number of words, about 80 to 90,000 words. And I thought, okay, well, if I can write 1,000 words a day, then, it's a long time. And so I had this strategy that I would run a 20-minute podcast every week, twice a week, and curate those articles, which is why in the title on the page, it says curated by. And I was speaking to someone earlier on saying, well, maybe I feel a bit of a fraud because I haven't written all of the words. So the idea of the process was to take down conversations that I've had with 50 experts and entrepreneurs about how to get noticed, how a business owner can get noticed. So the process was a little bit different in that I wasn't writing a novel, and I have a 5-stage methodology that I developed called Speak PR. And what I've done is I've curated those 50 articles into 5 different sections. And that was really where I worked to add value. So a process of content creation over the last 12 months sitting here on the podcast mic.
And I think it's a really important thing for anyone that's listening to the interview, is because this thing about being a bit of an imposter or a bit of a fraud because you haven't actually written and you've spoken it, and because there's almost like you think you have to write, and quite often the quickest, most effective way is to transcribe it, to speak it out and have it written for you. So how did you get over that? If you had that sense of being a bit of a fraud, what's worked for you to get through that?
Well, I think the assumption is that we're through that, Cheryl. We're not. I think not necessarily, although I did speak to a chap this morning in Australia, and he said, you're published. You've got a book that makes you an author. And I think that the other point is that it doesn't matter, what I think about myself, actually. What matters is that there's content in this book that will really help business owners. Yeah. So my ego actually is not what is at stake here. as an author, I've managed to curate the insights of 50 people from all over the world that I know can help other business owners like me. So what I think about myself is not really center stage in my book or my journey. It's how can I serve and help those people with the content that I know how to share.
And I think one of the questions I was going to ask you is, why did you write the book? And I think that's where you've touched on. You needed to stand out again in the British market, and you were coming back from Asia, and you happened to come across Karen at that poignant moment. Is there any other reason why you've written a book?
Yes, it's my sister, actually. So when I came back from Asia, I found I have 3 amazing women as sisters, and one of them is extremely talented around light and the impact that light makes on children and on people in general. But she was really struggling with how to position and how to package herself, and that's something that I know how to do. And we were having all these conversations about how to get a photography set up for her, how to brand her as a luminologist, how to get her interviews, and how to start getting articles and blogs and so on. I thought, well, why don't I put that into a podcast and then into a book? So my sister Shelley James, Dr. Shelley James, was really sort of my muse, if I can call her that, Cheryl. And I thought, what questions would she be asking now on her journey to becoming an international, and now she is an internationally renowned luminologist.
Fabulous stuff. And I think that's something that Karen definitely talks about on the Smart Author System, is about having a real clear idea of who you're writing to. And so you've obviously got a real live person there in mind that you're considering as you've written it.
Yeah.
Now I can see we've got 2 people live. Thank you so much for joining us. Please,
Great.
if you've got any questions with Jim, please put it in the chat box, and we will come back to those intermittently as we go through the interview. So what is the most important thing that you've learnt as a result of writing the book, as going through the processes of becoming an author?
Actually, I think you've hit on the word there. It's the process, Cheryl, because having the ideas, as it is with a business, is not the hard part. It's the process. And as you get more and more content, and it goes through different iterations, it needs versioning, needs editing, it needs approval, it needs to be formatted. This is my weak point, and probably for most authors, they're not process driven, probably, and so the process. Perhaps I can share with you and whoever's on the show what I did, because I actually used some technology. Can I share how I did that, Cheryl?
Please do. Yeah, that's the whole point of today.
So what I've done is I use a platform called Descript, and when I make my podcast, I get a transcript automatically in Descript. You can also use otter.ai or rev.com for this. And what happened then was that I was able to have that shared, and a person in the Philippines top and tailed it and edited the transcript and made it into an article. I then used those articles in my own company website, eastwestpr.com, but also on my Medium account, my LinkedIn account, my Facebook, my Twitter. And then with another VA in the Philippines, we used a platform called Dabble Writer. Have you heard of Dabble Writer?
No, I haven't. I had heard of the others.
Dabble Writer is this really cool tool for collaborative authoring. So many people are used to Google Docs, but it's not set up for long form content. Dabble Writer is an alternative to Ulysses, for example, which I was looking at. But Ulysses is desk bound and also has more functionality than I really wanted to get to grips with. I'm not trying to become an uber sophisticated author. I want to get my content into print. Dabble Writer is, if you like, a very simple, like Google Docs on steroids. But what's great about it is it's collaborative. So Alex, her name is, in the Philippines, was able to take those articles that Emmy had sort of reauthored and put them into Dabble Writer. And then I was able to resort those just by dragging and dropping into different chapters, because I mentioned I've got these 5 chapters of Storify, Personalize, Engage, Amplify, Know. So overnight, the content had been authored, uploaded. I was able to sort it and then we were able to then look at the whole book. And Dabble Writer's got a nice couple of metrics. It says, how many words you want for your book. So I put in 80,000 words, and it would tell me then where I was against my target.
Yeah.
So by using the technology, Dabble Writer was, I think, about $8 a month, and maybe 18 for the professional version. And what we used was a platform called LastPass, which you probably know of for sharing passwords. So instead of kind of going to town and buying multiple accounts slightly cheekily, I share through LastPass the access to Dabble Writer. So we can then work as one. Actually, it looks like we're just one person, but we're logging in. Then what we did was we can export from Dabble Writer into a format that was then sent to a lady in the Ukraine that we found on Upwork for $200 to do the pagination. And I'd done the book design myself, and I won't ask you to pass judgment on it, but so I'd save some time and money by doing that myself. But we were able to send the files through Alex in the Philippines to Katrina in the Ukraine. So my weak spot is administration. I could sort of never remember where I left things. And but there are many people who are great at it.
Yeah.
And the technology really helps as a workflow platform to facilitate the author. And then we were able to export from the Adobe platform, the EPUB, which then was able to go to the Kindle publication. So all online, and all done across the world, actually. So Cheryl, the process, I think, is really key, because you save a lot of time.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that makes Karen really magic, because she is somebody who is very process driven, and that's why she writes books so quickly, is because she's really good at seeing the process and very clear at articulating it. Whereas I know my journey's not been quite as quick and as efficient, because I've been working out what the process is in order to talk about it. What would be the one thing you'd wish you'd known before you started writing the book?
There are some marketing tools and tips, I think. And one of those is to engage the people that might support the book. And I've got 50 people that have contributed to the book. And what I made the mistake of was asking them afterwards to help me promote the book. And what I should have done was to have said, before I put them in the book, I'm going to put you in the book, but you need to help me to magnify and amplify. So some people have done it, and some people are too busy. But I think that's the one thing, really, Cheryl, I should have laid in advance my promotion plan a little bit more fully than I did, because as you know, the writing is really only half of it, but there's no point having them here on the shelf if they're not getting to the entrepreneurs or whoever the audience is. So thinking through the marketing, I think it's a
really, really interesting part, because I think most authors, they kind of want to make sure it's okay and it's good enough before they tell anybody about it. But actually, it's really important that you take people on your journey with you and share the journey. Even like for me, it's gone to the editor, I've pulled it, I've got to redo it, and I'm still now rewriting this section for whatever reason, because that keeps people engaged and in that anticipation of it, and you get a lot more support on the journey with it.
One thing I did, which was quite successful, was I did an A/B test on the cover. So I put into Canva a red on white and a white on red. I put that on LinkedIn and Facebook. I had nearly 4,000 views, and about 150 people made choose A or B. It was quite interesting, and that with quite a lot of conversation. And in fact, one element really made a significant change to the book design. So that would be definitely something, even if you don't share the content, to share the cover. About 4 to 6 weeks. I think if it's too far in advance, excuse me, then people have forgotten it. So I think you need to time that out. And for the next book, we'll know a little bit more about how long each of these stages take. But pre-marketing, I think, is really the key to this as well.
Definitely. So what would you say was your lowest point on your journey as an author?
Okay, I guess you have these kind of So I got to figure out which was the lowest of those. Where did I kind of drop off the bottom? We had this all together and we must have read it. How many times do you read these things? And I have an aspiring author next door. Well, I say aspiring, she's writing, her book. And I said, "Oh, Carol, I'm writing a book." And she said, "Oh, I'm writing a book." I said, "Well, you don't fancy just looking at the manuscript for me, do you?" And we'd already got the first proof copy from Kindle, so it was already printed. The cover looked a little bit different. And she came back that night. She said, "I don't know how to tell you this." She said, I really hope you don't mind. And she's a delightful, she said, "I did find one or two things." And I'm thinking, oh no, I'm like ready to go. I've told everybody it's ready. And she found some of the most arcane, if my daughter had left those in her school homework, I'd have been, shocked. So that was a low point, because I'm thinking, how many more are there that she's too polite to tell me about? So that was a low point where I thought I was finished. And of course, the lesson there really is to get a third-party copy checker well before you go to print. So I was a little bit premature, really, Cheryl, in trying to get the content out, but I'd set myself a deadline to get it out by. And I think, if I can also say, I think that a deadline is a good discipline to have. So yeah. I think a lot of people write and when it's ready, but I'm a bit of a fan of writing to a deadline and saying it'll be ready by this time, because I think it's Maxwell's law, isn't it? The time will expand, or the task will expand to fill the time.
Absolutely.
And is it Maxwell's law? It's somebody's law.
I'll definitely go and look it up, because my book's about time, so I'll definitely going to do that. But yeah, definitely, I agree that if you've got a deadline to work towards, and there's also that I think some authors, they have the deadline and then but they didn't know the process. So they didn't really anticipate, it wasn't a realistic deadline.
Yes.
And then you can get so hooked up on not failing and not hitting your deadline that then you don't do the best job for the book. So you do need deadlines to work towards. And I think there's definitely some value in what Karen talks about, doing it in 6 months. So you're not, because you can talk yourself out of it. You can do too many re-edits, rethinking about it. There's always more to write. There's always more to say.
I think that's right.
Works.
No, I think that's right. I think that this idea of having a deadline is good for everybody. But I think the other thing is that it's never going to be perfect. And I think this, one still looks at the book and goes, oh, I'd have put that comma somewhere differently, or is that the right shade? Yeah. And actually, a bit like, when you're a kid on stage in the school theatre and you come off and you go, oh, I forgot my lines, and your parents are like, you were great, and you're like, oh, but I missed it. They go, I wouldn't notice, right? No. So I think that only you notice. What matters is that you get it delivered. I think Karen's writing community and the fact that she's got a structure means that one has to look at one's own book and say, what would be your own timetables? But it's incredibly helpful for someone like me that she created the stages of it. Definitely. So absolutely.
So one last question then, what's been your biggest success to date?
Well, I think building the shelves to put the book on. I had to build the shelves to get it on. No, that is one success. I think what has been nice is that within the space of 2 weeks I've been able to get on to other people's podcasts and shows in America, for example, and people say, wow, you've got a book, let's have a conversation. And I'm still the same person, but the book gives me a platform, and it gives them a reason to introduce me as recently authored, as opposed to here's another English guy we think we could talk to. So I think the biggest success is getting the book published, but getting the access. I guess that's kind of a result, isn't it? In that sense, Cheryl, is that okay? Apart from the shelves.
Well, I think it is. But I think the shelves actually, even as a metaphor, it's a tangible thing, isn't it? It's like a lot of what you're doing when we're service based and we're following processes and we're working with people to establish stuff. it's often almost invisible. And so a book makes your wisdom and your learnings visible and tangible.
And joking apart, the shelves are important because of where I put them. And I think that one of the aspects for people to think about, especially in the Zoom era, is that when you finish your book, make sure that you've got a display that's visible. Right, that's right. So it's so easy to kind of leave them somewhere off site. And I've had a few conversations this week with people who say, "Oh, what's that on the back shelf?" And actually, they're talking about the trophy that I was given in China for Innovative Entrepreneur in 2017. I'm going, yeah, but above the trophy, I've got a book. And they're like, "Oh yeah, let's talk about the book." So positioning it in screen, because it creates a really natural way to have a segue about what you're doing. And that, in the same way that if you're socially, in a room with someone, there would be objects, so setting up your space, which gives you the ability to introduce your book, I think is also really, really important.
There's some great tips there. I'm just going to tag as well. I'm just going to put in the comments. You've put your website there, but I've also just added in the Amazon link. So anybody that's watching this, if you want to know about the 50 ways or 50 ideas for your company to stand out, then The Unnoticed Entrepreneur by Jim James is available at Amazon and on his website. So please do check it out. Thank you so much, Jim, for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here. And I wish you all the best with your published authorship now. Maybe you should say that as we finish. I am an author.
I feel like I go. But Cheryl, I did just want to clarify that the 50 ideas are not all my own. The key part of this is that it's like having a mastermind with 50 experts from around the world, and I think that's, we're a channel as an author for either our own ideas or for those ideas of other people, and that can be quite liberating as well. So, I really appreciate Karen's support, and you, Cheryl, just even inviting me on to the show to share my little victories. And will you be giving scores for the shelves? They are all level, which is good.
To give us scores, couldn't we? Could we give a score for that? Would be
scores on the shelves.
Should I? That would be fantastic.
Should I do more carpentry than authoring? Maybe.
On that note, I know that it's not about ego, but I do know the effort, the time and energy it takes to curate something if it's your own, let alone 50 other people's information. So a massive well done, and well done for getting through the journey and coming out the other side as a published author. So again, thank you for joining us today.
Very kind of you. Thank you so much for having me on the show.